question, Steve, because I think I find that the more we are aligned in understanding, the opportunity and the possibilities of all these strategies, whether it's workplace change management strategies, design strategies, technology tools, you still have that same old problem with people resisting change if they don't quite understand the value of what they're going to get with the new space or the new headquarters or the new office setting or the new technology tool. There's this thing called the paradox of the workplace, I like to call it, Steve. There's so many paradoxical statements. One week I'll have a guest on who will say, look at your desk. It's 20, look at your desk compared to 20 years ago. It's completely different, right? It's different technology. It's it's almost unrecognizable, right? And then another guest will come on a week later and say, look at your desk compared to 20 years ago. It's really pretty much the same at its core. You've got a working surface. You've got some type of a communication device. Maybe your phone is now a cellular mobile smartphone, whereas 20 years ago, it was a wired phone on your desk. Your computer may be sleeker and it may be more mobile, but at the same time, you need a comfortable place to do your work. And that really hasn't changed. So there's kind of a seemingly contradictory statement that are both true. And I find a lot of those on the show. You mentioned all these different guests, different perspectives. You'll have someone say, buildings today are totally different than they've ever been before. They're smart, they're automated, everything has changed. Whereas another person will say, I've been in the business for decades. When it comes to designing a building and construction and putting that building out for the facility management team to take over, it's really just a six-sided box. And we need to take care of the core elements, the foundational elements for operations and maintenance. And I'm like, yeah, there's two sides of the same coin, right? We've got this operations and maintenance side, the essential needs of a facility. And then you've got this other side of the coin, this new opportunity for employee engagement and employee experience that we're so focused on these last few years. Without that other side of the coin, without that foundation of a solid, systematic operations plan, you're not going to be able to achieve those more employee experience focused strategies.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Open Source Workplace interview series. I'm Steve Todd. I'm the founder of Open Source Workplace. If this is your first time coming across our videos, please like, subscribe, hit that notification bell so you receive all the alerts of upcoming videos that we put on here. I'm very happy today to have with us Mike Petrusky, who is the host of Workplace Innovator podcast. Mike, how are you doing? Great to have you with us today.
Steve, it's a honor to be on your show. This is a role reversal of sorts, but I'm excited to be here. Thanks.
No, I'm very excited to have it as a role reversal. I've obviously, partaken in your podcast, which was a great experience, and you did me very well. You edited out a lot of different things, so it'll be interesting to see how we go through this today. But yeah, so Mike, if people had to sort of, you want to tell people a couple of minutes of who you are, what you do.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's exciting to be on this end of receiving the questions. I might slip into my old habit, Steve, and ask you some questions along the way because it's what I do more naturally. But I am Mike Petrusky, host of the Workplace Innovator podcast, a weekly show. You can find us on Apple, iTunes, Spotify, and wherever you find your podcasts. Also at the iOFFICEcorp.com website. I work for iOFFICE, the leading employee experience focused IWMS software. And we like to say we deliver real-time data and mobile tools to help you intelligently manage your digital workplace. You can tell I've said that a few times, right, Steve? And so I'm the director of events at iOFFICE. So I get to travel the country and actually now a little bit across the world to share this exciting message about the digital workplace, the tools and available technologies that can help us to deliver great employee experiences for our organizations.
No, that's great. Thank you, Mike. I appreciate that. So I want to sort of go back a little bit in time, so to speak. I'm sure you didn't aspire to, host a podcast on workplace and employee experience. So what did that journey look like and how did you navigate into what you're currently doing?
I didn't expect to host a podcast, but way back, going back a number of years into college, I was a DJ in college. So they called me DJ Mike P. And I love music. Anybody who listens to this show will recognize the fact that I'm a huge fan of anything from the 1980s, new wave, rock, U2 being my favorite band of all time. We talk about those things on the show because I love the people side of things, the human side. When we had you on the show, Steve, I asked you about your time growing up in the UK and Northern Ireland and in Manchester and London. And we got these great stories going back and forth about movies. I got to ask you, did you ever make it to see the movie Mission Impossible Fallout, where it was based in Belfast?
I did actually. And you know something, it was complete accident that I was watching it, but I actually then said Belfast and I had a flashback to that podcast moment
There
when
you
you
go.
told me about that. Yeah. So yeah.
Well, that kind of stuff is important, I think, because I love, again, the commonality of all people I meet, whether they're executives, what I call is celebrities in our industry, IFMA or Cornet celebrities, people you see on stage and you see on podcasts and videos like this, or working for great organizations like yours at NASDAQ. I get very intimidated when I'm interviewing someone from, some of these big name companies that are very famous, right? And as humans, I think we just kind of put people at those companies or in those situations on a pedestal a little bit. And what I realize is that we're all the same, as Depeche Mode said it best in the 80s, people are people. So why should it be we treat each other differently? And I love the fact that once I get to crack the kind of the exterior surface of a guest, I ask about what they like to listen to music wise and what kind of motivates them and is their passion with the role they have playing a role in the workplace and the built environment overall, whether it's a facility management title or a workplace title or a real estate title, or even HR now and IT. We're trying to bring all the groups together. So whoever I speak to, personalities are different. I think that's the key. Personalities are different. And there are some differences with the generations, depending if it's a younger person or an older person, but we're all pretty much the same as far as what our wants and needs are. And I really love exploring that side of things and finding that common ground.
So I think that's a natural way you sort of explain from your radio to a podcast and what you're doing today, but why facility management?
That's a great story too. And I won't go into the long version, but really I stumbled into the community as many people do in the profession about 12 years ago, about 2007, 2008. A friend invited me to an IFMA meeting here in Washington, D.C. The capital chapter of IFMA is a huge chapter, a local community of facility management professionals and the partners, the business partners who are trying to help serve that community. So as a marketing guy, my background is in marketing. I was running an agency at the time, and I was trying to find, a way to help the associate members, the business partners, better communicate their value, their business proposition, their product, service, whatever it might be, to the FM practitioners, because in that community of running the day-to-day operations of a facility, they're so busy, they don't have really a lot of time to explore these things. Kind of what you're doing with open sourced Workplace. I mean, you've got this community now online with the power of technology where people can come together, find the resources and the experts they need. Well, that's kind of what I was doing at IFMA those first few years. And then as I really began to become a practitioner of content marketing and the strategy of putting out great content, expertise, information, education to help people. And that be the primary goal, putting out information to help people. And then, hey, when they find out who's putting out the information, who the expert is, we'll maybe explore the product or service you're offering. That was my philosophy in marketing. And I said, hey, folks, if you want to do this effectively, you should do all sorts of it. You should speak at IFMA conferences, go to Cornet, be a volunteer at the local chapter of IFMA or Cornet or whatever organization best suits your audience, and deliver educational speeches, deliver blogs, write papers, do research reports, white papers. And how about podcasting? You should do a podcast, because I think a lot of people like to consume information via audio, and podcasting was blowing up at the time. And I said, I'm going to try it and do it myself. And I created the FM Innovator podcast.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. No, and it's great, and obviously it's sort of evolved. So you did the FM Innovator podcast, and then that was going for a little while, and then it evolved into the Workplace Innovator podcast. How did that transition from a facility management podcast to a workplace podcast?
Yeah, the great plot twist, I call it, right? I was doing the show. I had about 85 episodes in the can. I had all along been an admirer of iOFFICE. They were very well known in our community, the facility management community, IFMA conferences. They were exhibiting, speaking. Elizabeth Dukes, the co-founder, was really sharing her expertise with the community. And this incredible marketing effort was going on. And I've always admired it as a marketer, the things that I was just describing, giving the free information, the blogs and the white papers and so forth. So I asked Elizabeth to be on my show, the old show, and we developed a friendship. And about a year and a half later, we were talking ways we could work together. And she just kind of had this epiphany and said, I want you on my team. Mike, I want you to join iOFFICE. And I said, wow, I really wasn't expecting that, but it's the kind of perfect match for what I like to do, and perfect alignment philosophically with a company that is offering workplace and facility management software solutions in a way that is very helpful to the audience I was reaching. So we decided to have me come on board, rebrand the show as Workplace Innovator, and then try to reach even a broader audience, kind of reach out to the corporate real estate world and reach out to HR folks and really build that community. So it's been a huge blessing and an opportunity to speak to so many great people and work with such great people. The team that I was admiring for years at iOFFICE, the marketing team, they're my colleagues now. And it's when I get behind the curtain and see all they do with such little resources. I mean, the number of people there are very few, but they're great creative people. Tiffany Rivers leads our team, the VP of marketing, and she has done an incredible job of putting out such great information and doing it in so many different ways through so many different platforms. So great to be on the iOFFICE platform with my podcast.
Great. Now, how easy was it to come that as a decision for you? Did you look at it as an opportunity for you? Did you look at it as that you sort of your own podcast had sort of evolved, or you were looking for another evolution? Because I have to imagine you must have been a little bit conflicted.
I did struggle with it a little, Steve, and it's funny you mentioned that. I talked to some of my good friends that I had developed from doing the earlier show, and I said, hey, my values, my desire to really serve the community and not be pushed in one direction or another when it comes to messaging or becoming a sales pitch. I didn't want that to be the case. So I was very careful to talk with Elizabeth and the team at iOFFICE. They were absolutely on board. It was again, if it wasn't such a perfect philosophical alignment marketing wise, it wouldn't have happened. But because they are so much believers in that idea of thought leadership and delivering value through education and great resources, it really was a great match. And then I talked to friends and said, hey, if I go on board and I'm working for a show that is actually operated by a company that is a great company, by the way, they offer some really valuable solutions and they're headed in the right direction. It just kind of aligned, and people said, yeah, go for it. I don't think you'll be anything but yourself, Mike. And that's what I've tried to do, is stay the authentic DJ Mike P you've always known. And I hope I do that.
Oh, no, you certainly do. It certainly comes across whenever you listen to the podcast. When I'm there, absolutely, it is totally unbiased, and it's all about, one, the guest, but two, ensuring that your audience actually receive the information that you want them to. Absolutely, I totally agree with you. So obviously, one of the benefits of whenever you're interviewing so many people, and we can talk about your travel exploits in a few moments, but in
Sure.
essence, geography, because the technology eliminates the geography problem, therefore you get access to so many great people. You must have learned a ton over those podcasts.
It's really been amazing. As I said, it's an honor. It's a privilege. I really don't feel like I don't deserve it, but at the same time, I just feel like I'm the voice of my audience at this point, where I want to ask the questions that they have and really cut beyond some of the buzzwords and get past a lot of the typical things we talk about at conferences and you read online. I think also it's very important to recognize the trends and understand the challenges in the workplace today, but also the opportunities with the technology and the cultural shifts happening in our world today. But when I get through all that and I talk to my guests, again, it really comes back to people and what they are doing and what they struggle with a little bit and what they can do to better bring an environment or create a space and a workplace that allows their employees or the occupants of their facilities, whomever that may be, to be the best people they can be and do the best work they can do. And that's what I'm most interested in. I love talking to people about the practical ways in which culture and technology and workplaces really allow us to deliver our best healthy selves to the workplace and therefore reach the organization's goals, right? Business outcomes are the desired result, but you get that by having places where people can be their best.
And how does that differ whenever you interview different people from different industries, geographies, size of companies? Does it vary much in either what they're sort of rolling out, what they're actually doing within their organization?
Yeah, that's a great question, Steve, because I think I find that the more we are aligned in understanding, the opportunity and the possibilities of all these strategies, whether it's workplace change management strategies, design strategies, technology tools, you still have that same old problem with people resisting change if they don't quite understand the value of what they're going to get with the new space or the new headquarters or the new office setting or the new technology tool. There's this thing called the paradox of the workplace, I like to call it, Steve. There's so many paradoxical statements. One week I'll have a guest on who will say, look at your desk. It's 20, look at your desk compared to 20 years ago. It's completely different, right? It's different technology. It's it's almost unrecognizable, right? And then another guest will come on a week later and say, look at your desk compared to 20 years ago. It's really pretty much the same at its core. You've got a working surface. You've got some type of a communication device. Maybe your phone is now a cellular mobile smartphone, whereas 20 years ago, it was a wired phone on your desk. Your computer may be sleeker and it may be more mobile, but at the same time, you need a comfortable place to do your work. And that really hasn't changed. So there's kind of a seemingly contradictory statement that are both true. And I find a lot of those on the show. You mentioned all these different guests, different perspectives. You'll have someone say buildings today are totally different than they've ever been before. They're smart, they're automated, everything has changed. Whereas another person will say, I've been in the business for decades. When it comes to designing a building and construction and putting that building out for the facility management team to take over, it's really just a six-sided box. And we need to take care of the core elements, the foundational elements for operations and maintenance. And I'm like, yeah, there's two sides of the same coin, right? We've got this operations and maintenance side, the essential needs of a facility. And then you've got this other side of the coin, this new opportunity for employee engagement and employee experience that we're so focused on these last few years. Without that other side of the coin, without that foundation of a solid, systematic operations plan, you're not going to be able to achieve those more employee experience focused strategies.
I'm just nodding along as you're talking because I just did an interview with Joseph White from Herman Miller, and I was actually in Michigan not that long ago, and part of when I would give me a book, and the book was a document that was put together in 1968 to describe the office and what the office of the future looks like. And I read it, and honestly, the same questions that we have today about the office and how people are going to be working tomorrow is almost verbatim there in 1968. So to your point, right, does it change, does it not change, or does it just change a lot slower than what we actually think it'll change, But I sort of echo that as well. So with all these conversations, you must have heard some wonderful ideas of how people and how organizations are trying to elevate the employee experience. What are some of those great things that you've heard?
Well, the trends are really towards one of meeting the expectations of the people in our facilities, whether it's an employee or a visitor, making it a frictionless experience. Talk about buzzwords. I love the fact that we talk about technology, but not just technology, frictionless technology, Steve. But again, talk about paradoxical. I just had a guest on who was really an expert in innovation thinking. And she kind of countered that idea of frictionless as saying, sometimes if things are too easy, too smooth, it turns our brains off and turns our creative side off. We just kind of go into a flow because we don't have to deal with any issues, any problems. And therefore we kind of limit our ability to innovate and be creative. So again, paradox. Obviously this constant debate over the open office and different strategies around activity-based, agile working, flexibility, mobility, all those things that really we've come to expect in the office today or wherever we decide to do our work. I'm a remote worker here in Washington, D.C. My office is based in Houston. I've got colleagues that are spread out throughout the world. So the fact that we can still be part of a single organization and be in different parts of the world and come together every so often, whether it's at the headquarters in Houston or at a conference we meet, we have this understanding of the vision of the company, the mission of the company, and what we're all trying to achieve. So as long as we encourage workplace leaders to really recognize that it doesn't matter so much the generation of the person, the role or responsibility of the job, that there's this bigger holistic view that includes culture and the common needs of being able to work without frustration. So I think there's a level of needing technology to be a helper as opposed to an inhibitor of our productivity. But there's also that need to communicate and make sure people feel part of the team and the organization. I think one of the greatest quotes I've had from my show is this concept, again, paradoxical, of the fact that we're the most connected we've ever been. Here, you and I are talking across the internet via Zoom, and other tools are available to allow us to do that. And technology keeps us connected all the time, right, with our phones and our devices. But we're also, at the same time, the most isolated we've ever been. People feel an isolation because of technology. There's a lack of that human connection. That's why I find it so valuable to go to IFMA's World Workplace, or the CoreNet Global Summit, or Workplace Week in New York, where we met, a couple of years ago. Those events where you're touring a facility face to face, walking around, talking to someone, you can't replace that with technology. So we have to keep those things in mind.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I totally agree with you on that sort of personal interaction. I mean, I work from home a couple of days a week. The days that I'm in the office, it's just a completely different environment, just in experience, just in how you feel connected. You can talk on the phone, we can talk on video with my colleagues, but actually in person is so important. I totally agree, totally agree.
Totally.
So you're also always on the road, Mike. Um, and every, I obviously follow you on Twitter and other social media, and I'm always amazed how often you are on the road and where you're presenting, and obviously you're a very in-demand guy. You sell a lot of tickets, so to speak.
Well,
Well,
thanks.
what's some of the fun places that you've been, and some of the audiences that you've been sort of a little bit different in a sense, who maybe ask you a little bit different questions, and sort of opened your mind a little bit?
Oh, I love that question. I do love the time on the road, although it's tough to, eat healthy and stay on the treadmill, as they say, when you're traveling. But I knew I was going to be on video today, Steve. So I set a goal a few weeks ago. I don't want to brag about it, but I said I'm going to lose some weight, want to look good for the video interview today. So my goal was to lose 10 pounds before I got online with you today. And Steve, as of this morning, I only have 15 pounds to go. So
Well done, well done. That sounds about right.
that's about right. That's Joe courtesy of Jim Gaffigan. But he basically really taps into that idea of, I want to be healthy. I want to do the right things. But when you're being driven in all these different directions, whether it's travel or even in your day-to-day at work, it's really hard to, take some time for yourself. So that's a goal as we head into the new year. 2020 is around the corner here. Got to do better at that. But as far as great locations and people, we've done a couple of panels, a couple of webinar broadcasts I do, and I've invited people from outside the traditional facility management and real estate world. In fact, bringing in HR people has been one of the most interesting parts of the show and parts of my travels, is going to these conferences and bringing in that conversation with the human resources mindset, because they use a lot of the same terms we do, Steve, in facility and real estate. When we talk about employee experience, for example, we think about the spaces and the amenities and the way that the employee engages with their workplace. And an HR person talks about employee experience quite a bit too, but they're thinking about the more holistic life cycle of an employee, from their recruitment and their first impressions of a company, the branding that's important, to the onboarding process, to the, yes, working and what it's like to work there. But they really talk more in terms of meeting their needs for like daycare for their children, or mother's rooms for working women. And then this whole life cycle, the experience journey, the roadmap or the journey map of an employee from beginning to maybe when they leave the company, and then expect them to maybe to boomerang back. All those things go into the experience of an employee. So it's really opened my eyes to different terminologies that we use that mean sometimes many different, very different things.
No, one thing I'd also echo to that is even in the real estate or facility management, one company to the next company, just words mean different things, and then you go to different departments. I totally buy into what you're saying. I know from my own experience, you just have to think about the word agile technology and a real estate person. It just means two very, very different
Absolutely.
things.
Yes.
So one question I always like to ask every guest, I can almost speak today.
I've been there. I know what it's
I
like,
know you
Steve.
have. I know you have.
I
I
get
know
to
you
edit
have.
my show, though. You need to
There
get
you
into an
do. There you
editing
do. I don't
process.
like to edit it, so it'd be good to hear some of the comments that we
This is
get.
more authentic, the
There you
real
go.
experience here.
There you go. There you go. So, yeah. So, given all the experience and advice you've had, your experiences, so the companies you work for, and those who you've interviewed, if there's one piece of advice or guidance you could give to the audience that allow them to maximize workplace productivity, employee experience, either for themselves or for the people that they represent and look after in their own companies, what would that be?
Wow, really good. It goes back to the beginning, my marketing background. It's Seth Godin. You're familiar with him, Steve.
Yeah.
I've mentioned him before on the show. He's an author, a marketing guru, I call him, and he's come up with so many great nuggets because he understands that human side of us and our default setting when it comes to maybe filling in the blank with negativity when we don't know what's going on. So the need to communicate better because people will kind of automatically assume a negative if they don't get the positive value of what you're talking about. But Seth says this, he says, we need to be comfortable being uncomfortable. And the fact that whatever you're doing today, because of the fast moving world in which we live, the technology advancing, the rapid change of cultures, we just need to be always adaptable. And I think that the greatest advice is to be comfortable being uncomfortable, step outside what you're used to, your comfort zone, try something new, learn something new. Maybe it's going back and getting another credential. Maybe it's going to just a conference or reading a blog online or listening to a podcast or an interview like this, but going to open source Workplace and really exploring what's going on in your community, your industry, and really just kind of getting out of that comfortable place where you are and asking for help, asking someone else for advice, going across the street, seeing what another organization or another person is doing. And the greatest quote from Seth that I always used to end my speeches with, I need to go back to this because it's still relevant today, is if what you did today wasn't hard, you didn't expose yourself to enough risk and fear. Because that's the thing, we're all fearful of what we don't know. We're fearful of being found out. For me anyway, when I'm on this show and interviewing these very smart people, I'm afraid the imposter syndrome tells me I'm going to be found out as this guy who really doesn't know that much, but I just happen to have a microphone and an ability to post a podcast. But I think people are appreciative of the fact they know they're not in this alone and that they have other people who are going through a similar human experience.
No, I love that. And I totally agree with you. Everything I'm trying to do to open source Workplace absolutely just echoes the sort of sentiment you're trying to put through, Mike. So look, I appreciate it. Is there anything else before we wrap up that you want to share or mention?
Well, I do like to sing on the show very poorly, Steve. And that reminded me when I talked about fear, U2 is my favorite band.
Oh, I know.
You met them, right?
You
told me a story, and I was so excited to hear your story about how you met them. Folks, you have to check out episode 27, I think it is, of the Workplace Innovator podcast.
We'll put a link to it.
Awesome. Of Steve's brush with greatness and Bono and the boys. But certainly in today's world and the fact that I always think, well, people have it all together. I'm the one who's a mess. I don't really know what I'm doing here. And if people really knew what was in my mind, they'd be shocked. But it turns out we're all in the same boat, right? Even Bono and even the rich rock star from Ireland wrote on his most recent album a song called "The Little Things That Give You Away." And I often quote this during my speeches where he says, sometimes I can't believe my existence. I see myself from a distance. I can't get back inside. Sometimes the air is so anxious. All my thoughts are so reckless and all my innocence has died. And then here's the part, Steve, I'm sure you can relate to as I do. Sometimes I wake at 4 a.m. when all the darkness is swarming and it covers me in fear. Sometimes. So here it is. Bono is waking at 4 a.m. and his mind starts racing as ours do, right? We wake up and think about the day ahead and that interview you're going to give or the project that's due at work or what your boss is expecting of you. We all have that same anxiety that comes from our daily existence. And the fact knowing that even a rich and famous rock star has that same struggle. I have that same struggle. You do, Steve. Whoever's listening to this or watching this, you're not alone in what you're dealing with. And, get outside and reach out to a community through IFMA, CoreNet, whatever it might be, the open source network, Workplace, please. And you'll find people that can help you along the way.
Perfect. Thank you, Mike. And I knew we couldn't go through without you singing, man. I just knew it. But
we didn't talk about Star Wars. You want to talk about the new movie coming out? Well, next episode, Rise of Skywalker.
There you go, man. There you go.
I came prepared with my Yoda if you asked about Star Wars.
You're crazy, man.
Thank you, Steve. Very good interview you are. Thank you, Steve.
Mike, you're an absolute legend. Thank you so much, sir. And I look forward to catching up with you next week.
Thanks for having me on the show.
All right, man. Thank you.